I've been expecting you. Yes. I couldn't find a cat. We all know Yahtzee from the hit show Zero Punctuation. We also know that he had an episode dedicated to bashing webcomics, talking about how bad they are and how little effort they cost. But what a lot of people don't know is that Yahtzee, before he became the Zero Punctuation guy, had a webcomic called Yahtzee Takes on the World. And that's what we're going to look at today in the Webcomic Relief. When Yahtzee was about 20 years old, before he made Zero Punctuation, he created a monster. A monster he today seemed to not be very proud of. Hence the episode where he trash-talked webcomics. And like any monsters, this one comes back to haunt its maker. The story is about Yahtzee wanting to take over the world. Wow, that's not subtle at all. And that's really it. The story is simply parted up into different plans that Yahtzee uses to take over the world and the people wishing to stop his evil master plan. This involves getting the finance for the whole thing from Vegas, selling weed, forcing people to eat it, placing big lasers on rocket ships, and shooting agents. In fact, I'll have to stop it right here for a minute. Now, I'm a webcomic artist, in case you haven't noticed from the healthy amount of advertisement I've been throwing around. But before I made a webcomic, I had a comic that I made in the equivalent of the Danish secondary school. Now, this is before I started drawing as well. The comics were written and drawn at the top of blocks of paper we were given in school to take notes with. And the reason I'm bringing this comic up is because I made this when I was about 14 or 15 years old. And it's all the same jokes as Yahtzee uses, which are the typical, I got a big gun so you'll do as I say. With a very crude humor where the punchline is simply someone getting a battle axe jammed sideways up one's ass. So when I say these jokes are something a 15-year-old could write, it's because they could. And have been! Some of the jokes are okay, and I would be lying if I said I didn't get my chuckle from some of them. But I never really felt that they were all that well thought through. Surprisingly enough, the funniest things are when they break the fourth wall. And the only time they really take you by surprise is when they out of nowhere introduce King Penguin. Of course, every attempt Yahtzee and his gang has to take over the world is foiled by either sheer stupidity or, well, sheer stupidity. I know you aren't supposed to go into depth with these comics, but this one really rang a bell on my what the fuck radar. We established pretty early on that Yahtzee and his crew has pretty much all the credit in the world due to selling drugs, so why haven't they bought bigger guns? I mean, the only things they use are a silent gun, a sniper rifle, and a big ray gun that can blow up the entire world. The charm of the comic, however, is that you can see Yahtzee's typical humor shine through once you get about 100 strips in. But you really have to strap yourself in with patience, cause these jokes are predictable, boring, and the story is flawed and repetitive. Now I understand how you sometimes want to have a real-life character in a comic to sort of have a reference of how the person acts and how he is. But when you start to put yourself inside the webcomic, and you do it like this, then it becomes what we here at the Webcomic Relief would like to call an ego-rub comic. Now, an ego-rubbing comic isn't necessarily just putting yourself into your own story. But if you read through the comic, you quickly notice that Yahtzee rarely to never makes any mistakes and always seems to know what's going on. He's also usually the guy making all the I have a bigger thing than you jokes. Given he sometimes do show flaws and mistakes, but never really big enough to screw anything up. On the other hand, there's something he never screws. Wow, I really did write that, didn't I? Next there's Paul, who has about as much personality as a cardboard box with sunglasses on. His only function throughout the entire comic is to invent stuff with one hand and having the other in his pocket for reasons I don't want to know. Wait, you were thinking it too? And I like how we are suddenly forced to accept that Paul is the best thing that has happened to science since Dr. Insano. And out of nowhere he's a freaking android? Hello? Explanations? Anyone? Oh, fuck it. Moving right along, cause these characters are making my brain hurt, we got Rob. If you take the pussy whipping from Raiden from Metal Gear 2, Frodo from Lord of the Rings, almost the entire cast of Nier, Nero from Devil May Cry 4, Hope from Final Fantasy 13, and the entire cast of Black Pussy Pounders 9, you won't get near to cover how pussy whipped this guy is. Why is this guy in the comic? He has no use, he is not even funny. I swear, where most men have their balls, this guy has a freaking wah-wah machine. On an unrelated note, I got the Pac-Man sound. But I am really not kidding here. This guy has one function. He has biotic eyes. Do they serve a purpose? No! Kick this guy out! Of course the comic has a female character in the form of Ludova. And because she's a woman, of course I'm gonna cut her some slack. Of course not! I guess out of all the characters, Ludo is the one I like the most. But seriously, it's rather obvious why she's in this comic. To create a love interest. She has 11 appearances since her introduction till we establish she has the hots for Paul. Why? You are really giving this comic too much credit. Now I'll admit I kind of like her because she's sweet and innocent and clearly not made to look extremely hot. Oh, fuck you! That hypocrite. That fucking hypocrite! This has been made by the guy who more or less said he hated manga and anime because the weird colored hair and twatty looks. Yahtzee, my dear friend, look at your creation. Look at it! Pull me out strong. Allow me to quote our dear reviewer here. If you don't know anyone who can draw, and you yourself draw like a clipper-handed freak child who just discovered MS Paint, don't fret. Just write excessive amounts of dialogue and hide the hideous art behind speech bubbles. If that's the case, Yahtzee should have stuck to writing a book. Hello! I will now be silent for a bit and let you take in the art for a little while, and if you're not looking like I do after it's all over, you got the strength of a million men. Here goes. Do I really need to say anything about this art other than look at it? If paint had arms, it'd pull its own power cord in shame. The backgrounds are only this one horizontal line at every picture, sometimes with an angle, and most of the time the characters either have their hands in their pockets or behind their head or back. I'm an artist. I get that it's hard to draw hands, believe me, I know, but come on, at least try. Also, here are 3 comics in a row. Feel free to stop me whenever it seems like, oh I don't know, the same picture has been used over and over again. It's okay to maybe do it for a few frames to establish that nothing happens, but for 3 complete strips, that's where I draw the line. For what it's worth, it's nice touch that he has colors and even uses it to crack jokes. But yeah, the art is horrible. Good thing he decided to do something he's really good at instead. I couldn't find any more liquor. Yahtzee has luckily ended this comic and gone to something much better. If it wasn't for the fact that Yahtzee is pretty famous right now, I would probably pass this comic up in an instant. It's boring, it emits of childish humor, and the only thing it needs to become directly horrible is the cake is a lie joke. But then again, the comic was made before that. The stories are free. While the characters does have their own unique personalities, most of these characters are just bad. They're too plain and fill their roles as they should, but nothing more than that. And fuck Rob now that I remember that guy. The characters are too. As for the art, I gotta say that even though it looks horrible, there's been an honest to God effort here. Yahtzee has used paint to its full potential, or at least tried to. The art stays the same, which is good in its own way, but I prefer to see some actual development. The art is a free as well, so it all boils down to a free. The comic is bad, boring and plain. It doesn't push any envelopes, it doesn't bring anything new to the table other than the person taking over the world bit. But I can't recommend it to anyone, unless you want to know what Yahtzee did before he became famous. You know what he should do? A comic with all the small little guys he uses in his show and with jokes from his current age. Now that would be awesome. But it'll be just as awesome if you write a webcomic down here you want me to review, and I'll be sure to take a look at it. And I'll see you next time at the Webcomic Relief. Take care. Wait, hold up. An entire comic of a guy and I haven't been using that joke yet? Well, here it is.
Of course!